Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness is the latest collectible creature battling game for the Nintendo GameCube. Gale of Darkness is a sequel to Pokemon Colosseum, which came out last year. This game is pretty much the same as its predecessor. You collect shadow Pokemon and purify them to turn them into regular Pokemon. You then use those Pokemon to battle with just about everyone you see, be they friend or enemy. The draw for Pokemon has always been collecting all the weird creatures you can find and tossing them into a fight to see how they do. It's not much different here, but the collection aspect of the game does feel a little bit limited by the fact that you can only catch shadow Pokemon. Well, actually you can also collect some wild Pokemon this time around, but it's still not quite the same as the classic Pokemon games where you could catch any creature you happen to bump into. Anyway, there is a story here. Basically, an evil group known as Cypher is rounding up all the shadow Pokemon in the world in order to create an army of evil creatures to take over the world. Of course, you can't let that happen, so you set out with your trusty Pokemon to stop Cypher and snag and purify as many shadow Pokemon as possible in the process. Early in the game, you get a device that lets you see which Pokemon are shadow Pokemon and which ones are normal. When you see a shadow Pokemon, you can toss a Pokeball at it and try to capture it. Once captured, a shadow Pokemon has to be purified so that it will open its heart to you so you can use them in battle. It's an odd concept, yeah, but whatever, it works alright in the context of the game. In order to purify a Pokemon, you can carry it with you and use it in battle, or you can place it in the Purification Chamber. The Purification Chamber is a device that lets you purify Pokemon with minimal effort. Basically, it's a virtual space where you can place a shadow Pokemon in the center of a circle, then arrange a regular Pokemon around it. Based on how the Pokemon are placed and what type they are, they'll interact with shadow Pokemon to reduce its heart gauge to 0. Once that happens, you can perform the purification ritual and voila, you have a regular old Pokemon. As you play through the game, your Pokemon will grow stronger and eventually evolve, but if you played any Pokemon game before, you know that whole routine. All the fights here are double battles, which means you and your opponent will each have 2 Pokemon in play at a time. This makes the battles a little more than simple tit-for-tat exchanges, because you have one Pokemon to heal or inflict status effects while the other attacks. The only problem with the battles is that later in the game they tend to drag on for a long time since all the creatures are pretty tough. Also, since you can't capture most of the Pokemon you fight, the battles aren't as rewarding. The game also has the requisite GBA and GameCube link-up mode, so you can battle up to 3 of your friends using Pokemon you've collected on the GBA games. It's a fun way to revisit your old Pokemon collections, but the battles can get a bit lengthy and dull if you have a bunch of super buff monsters. The single-player story in Gale of Darkness will take you around 20 hours to complete, but of course you can spend much more time than that trying to collect every critter in the game. Basically, if you're a Pokemon fan, you'll enjoy this game, but if you haven't played Pokemon before, this isn't really the best place to pick it up.